Hello and welcome to the Drexel Interview. I'm your host, Paula Marantz Cohen, speaking to you from the A.J. Drexel Picture Gallery at Drexel University in Philadelphia. Today my guest is James Kaplan, novelist, journalist, and biographer, most recently the author of the acclaimed two-volume biography of Frank Sinatra. This is the first part of a two-part interview. In this interview, we'll discuss the first volume of Mr. Kaplan's biography, Frank the Voice, which deals with Sinatra's formative years, his tremendous early success, his career slump, and his comeback. In the second part, we'll discuss Volume 2, Sinatra the Chairman, which chronicles his continued tumultuous life and his emergence as an iconic figure in American entertainment. James Kaplan, welcome to the Drexel Interview.
Thank you, Paula. Delighted to be here.
Well, you put in your first volume, which we're going to discuss here in this episode, you talk quite a bit about Frank Sinatra's mother, Dolly.
Yes.
She was a very powerful and vibrant woman,
Yes.
and she had a great influence on him. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about her importance.
She had enormous importance. Frank Sinatra was an only child, which was highly unusual in those days, but he weighed 13 pounds at birth, and Dolly was a very small woman. She was under 5 feet tall. And it was an extremely difficult birth, and I think she decided after he was born that she'd rather not go through that again. She was a brilliant woman, and in many ways she and her son, her only child, were the same person. She was brilliant, she had a volcanic temper, she was pathologically impatient. She was often absent when he was growing up, and when she was present, she was a rough mother to have. Sinatra later said that he never knew whether his mother was going to hug him or hit him. And she did both. She did both. She and his father, Marty, ran a bar called Marty O'Brien's, which was named after Marty's. Marty was very briefly an extremely unsuccessful bantamweight prize fighter in the 1920s. He had tattoos all over his arms. And they ran this bar called Marty O'Brien's, and behind the bar they used to keep a little billy club in case there were problems of any sort. Anyway, when there were problems with Frank, Dolly would take out the billy club and give him a whack with it.
So anyway, you really give a picture of somebody who would have put her stamp on her son.
Yes, literally in some cases.
Literally.
Yeah.
And it's interesting you say how brilliant she was, because you also say throughout the book and in your second volume as well that Frank Sinatra was a musical genius,
Yes.
and I agree with you there.
Yes.
And so his genius manifested itself in his music. And I wonder how early or at what point you think that showed itself, and whether he was aware of it and it became part of what gave him the confidence he had to push forward.
He claimed in later life that when he was just a kid in Hoboken, New Jersey, that he heard the music of the spheres. And that sounds very airy-fairy, and it sounds kind of fanciful, but I think in his case it was literally true. I think this was a guy whose musical gifts were on a Mozartian level. It's the kind of musical mind that comes along maybe every 200 or 300 years.
Funny, we don't think of Sinatra in that
Of
way.
course we don't. But when you see the movie Amadeus, do you think of Mozart in that way? You see a strange character who misbehaves a lot, which is what Sinatra was. It is a hard thing to carry around genius, and he had a hard time with it.
Well, I hope we can talk more about the musical part, but
Yeah.
going on with so much of Sinatra's mystique is connected with his life story and his connections and so forth, the mob being one,
Yes.
from an early age.
Yes.
And I wonder, the connection with the mob that you trace or you discuss throughout the two volumes, did it have its beginnings in his childhood
Yes.
neighborhood in
Yes.
Hoboken,
Yes.
right? Tell us
Yes.
about
Hudson
that.
County was Hudson County was very strongly Irish-American, but there was also great influence of the mob in Hudson County. There was the famous boss of Jersey City, Frank Hague, had a lot of friends in the mafia, and Dolly Sinatra, as somebody who was very plugged in politically, had a lot of friends in the mafia and began helping Frank get some of his early jobs through some of her mob connections, because the mob ran a lot of things. They ran a lot of the bars, they ran the jukeboxes, and they ran the nightclubs. And so when Sinatra began performing in clubs at a very young age, he began encountering these men, and they were sort of heroes to him.